Hello, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. It's exciting to be here and thank you for joining us. My name is Christina Serrano. I'm Director of Faculty Engagement at Singularity University, and it is my great pleasure to introduce you to our panelists today. I'm going to allow each of them to introduce themselves. Let's start with Regina.
I'm Regina Njima, and I'm the CEO and managing partner of Keys Ventures, a company based in Kenya, and our mission is to help entrepreneurs and corporate leaders in innovation. Also for Singularity University in Kenya and the East African region.
Awesome, thank you so much. How about we kick it over to Jahil?
Thank you, Christina. Hello, everyone. My name is Jahil Oliver. I'm the founder and CEO of Hello Tractor, an agricultural technology company, and I'm also based in Nairobi, Kenya.
Thank you. And last but not least, Mr. Nicholas Hahn.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nicholas, and I'm a faculty chair of Global Grand Challenges at Singularity University. I also do consulting work with the United Nations, building food security forecasting systems for the world. And I'm also working with Regina on Kizo Ventures in East Africa, igniting innovation and entrepreneurship in the region.
Awesome, thank you. So as you can see, you're in for a real treat. There's some amazing people here to talk with us today. I'd love to get us started by asking Nick, can you help us or help our viewers really understand the opportunities for innovation in advancing food security in Africa?
Sure, thank you, Christina. If one is to understand the opportunities for innovation in Africa, it requires us to change our mindsets. And if there's one thing that is a common thread at Singularity University, you know, is this opportunity to change our mindsets about technology with this exponential framework and abundance. And really from a geography point of view, Africa is the place to change our mindsets. Whatever narrative we've been told over the years, received wisdom, is really something to be challenged. And depending upon where we come from in the world, myself, I've been living in Africa for 30 years professionally. Depending upon where we come from, we probably have received a certain narrative that we think of when we think of Africa. And probably common to that is the highlighting of severe food insecurity. And there are good reasons for that, because certainly these are very real issues and they're not to be made light of. But that's not the real narrative of where Africa is going in the future and what the current potential is. I say that from the perspective as a global food security analyst, and I'm one of 4 people in the world who sits on a famine review committee that actually makes the call as to whether or not a country is in famine. And sure enough, the places that are most likely to be in famine are in Africa, but that is not at all the story of Africa at large. Rather, let's talk about how large Africa is. So if Benjamin could put a slide up on the screen, please. Ben, can you confirm if that slide's up there?
It is up.
Great. So you can see from this slide how the land comparison of the continent of Africa compares to all of these other countries. You can fit the United States comfortably, China, India, Eastern Europe, Germany, France, Spain, the Netherlands, Great Britain, Japan, etc., all within Africa. And the other storyline here is within that massive land mass, there are 54 different countries and upwards to 2,000 different languages. And that means different cultures and diversity within Africa. So the storyline here is it is a massive area with incredible diversity, both geopolitically and also ethnically, and also in terms of land use and biodiversity. Next slide, please. Is that up there, Ben?
It is up.
Great. And where Africa is going in the future is going to be a dominant role in global affairs. Up until recently, it was easy for the rest of the world to look the other way about what's going on in Africa. But actually, you can't do that anymore. whether it comes to solving global challenges or wanting to be a big player in the global innovation and entrepreneurship space. This is a graph that shows the demographic trends of Africa. By the end of this century, it is going to catch up to all of Asia. That's China, India, and the rest of the countries there combined. Africa will catch up to them in terms of population. And the moment we're seeing right now, it happens to be we are living through this transition right now. You can see the uptake in population demographics in Africa and a curving off in the population dynamics in Asia and a complete flatlining in Europe and North America. Now, some people might say, oh gosh, that's going to be a real cause for challenges, and it is, but it's also tremendous opportunity for igniting innovation, particularly amongst the youth. And I'm going to leave you with a few statistics just to frame this a little bit more in terms of food. Africa, in terms of global uncultivated arable land, has 60% of it. Cultivatable lands in Africa are 3 times larger than the current land cultivated. 70% of Africans depend on agriculture for their livelihood. So when we speak of food, it's not just how people eating food, we're talking about people's livelihoods. And why is this the case? It's because 80% of farms in Africa are less than 2 hectares. We're talking about smallholder agriculture. And then another element here, which should not be overlooked, is the pastoral community. Pastoralists represent over 1/4 of the total population in Africa, living on about 43% of the continent's total land mass. So that's a bit of framing about the opportunity for Africa innovation with regards to agriculture. And Christine, I'll hand it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that framing, Nick. That was really helpful. Let's dig deeper into some of those contextual details. So Regina and Jahil, I'm going to pass over a 3-part question to you. So first part, I'd love for you to discuss both the role that tech can play in advancing food security in Africa and how the work that you're engaging in is really pushing that forward. And how is that reflective of innovation opportunities? And then finally, what are some of the challenges that you're starting to encounter or have been encountering in addressing this work? And how might we approach attending to those issues so that we can really maximize these opportunities? How about we start with Regina?
Perfect, cool. So definitely tech is going to play a critical role in addressing food security issues on the continent in Africa. And that varies from low tech to high tech to exponential technology. I think in this case, technology will play a critical role. As you look at some of the big issue around food insecurity, around storage, distribution, there's policy issues. Of course, there's also the tech issues. When you look at distribution and a couple of platforms, for example, we farm in Kenya, where they're using low-cost technology, using feature phones and connecting all farmers, and farmers are able to get information on where to buy their inputs and where to sell their produce, and so they can also be able to maximize their profits. We are also seeing a bit advanced technology like AgriCore. This is a new initiative by Salon that's using blockchain technology, again, to connect farmers, to connect governments, to connect governments, financial institutions, producers, aggregators. They are all coming in this platform, and it's also providing a trusted environment where people will be able to trace where food is to ensure quality, and farmers will also be able to sell directly to vendors so that and reduce the middlemen who, of course, get most of the profits. So we're seeing all types of technology around. I'm going to stop my video. I think my connection is not so good. Around storage, we are seeing technologies there's a company called Solar Freeze, where they're trying to solve the problem around storage of food and making especially perishable food. So they're using solar energy to provide a real cool storage container so that food can move from farm to restaurants to table in a secure and efficient way, so that farmers are not encountering a lot of losses. So that's around our technology. When it comes to challenges, definitely there's a lot of challenges in these sectors, and I think there are challenges from policy to begin with. I think, as all of us know, Africans, or rather our leadership and also the farmers and we as people, we've not embraced GMO. This is biotech technology, and there's a lot of fears and myth and resistance around using genetically modified seeds so that people can plant seeds or fertilizers and use pesticides that are resistant to the weather patterns on the continent. So there's a lot that needs to be done around that, maybe from policy issues, a lot of awareness that needs to be done so that people are informed, so they know that's an opportunity that they could actually exploit. They use GMO seeds. But the good news is a few countries, including Kenya, we just launched our first biotech incubator. It's actually help farmers and also the local people to be able to genetically modify our own seeds for farmers. I'm going to pass over to Jahil.
Yeah, thank you so much. Those are really interesting points. Really cool about the Solar Freeze company. Jahil, please, as someone who is working directly with small ag holders, et cetera, would love to hear your thoughts on this question.
Thank you, Christina, and thanks for teeing this up so perfectly, Regina and Nick. You mentioned, Nick in his remarks mentioned that Africa has 60% of the global share of uncultivated farmland. And our company, Hello Tractor, is using technology to address that challenge, which is a challenge that is, by the way, compounded by some demographic shifts that are happening on the continent. You look at rapid urbanization, you look at some demographic shifts around the aging farm population. Underlying all of these demographic trends are a depletion of labor that is available to cultivate that rich resource that Nick alluded to. And I think, you know, when you frame some of the challenges in sub-Saharan African agriculture, rarely do you think about lack of labor, right? Because there's that narrative around unemployment and the youth bulge. But this is a very real challenge. And so we, as a company, have leveraged technology to make it profitable for individual entrepreneurs to purchase tractors as a business asset and connect to farmers who need tractor services in our marketplace, right? And it's purely technology driven, but because there's such a rich resource of labor and individuals like Regina mentioned, We Farm, and all these great companies doing great work across the last mile, we also leverage those relationships to get that equipment, to enable our ecosystem to get that equipment out to these farmers who have been organized by these groups to ensure that service delivery happens in a timely and affordable way. And that's so important because these are rain-fed systems. And for most cereals, for example, every single day that you plant late, you lose about a point to a point and a half in yield. And it takes a human about 30 days to manually prepare a plot of land that's, you know, a hectare, which is the average plot size in Nigeria when we started. A tractor can do that work in just a couple hours. And so this ability to fill that labor gap with some basic technology like a tractor that's been around for decades, coupled with IoT technology, mobile applications, which is our core competency, we're able to bridge that labor gap and make sure farmers can cultivate their land on time and maximize their productivity. Now, that's even more important in the face of COVID-19 and social distancing policies that have reduced the availability of labor because now migrant labor can't move around, right? If I live in Nairobi County, I can't get to Nakuru County in Kenya because there's no cross-county movement, right? So if I'm a laborer, which I'm not, I'm too lazy to be a farm laborer, but in the world where I am, I would not be able to get out into the field to support those farmers, but tractors can. And so that has become, that has emphasized the value of making sure farmers have access to equipment. And I think you think about longer term, what are some of the challenges in the marketplace? COVID-19 will eventually go away, but there's still some structural challenges. The access to capital is one, right? Bank lending to support individuals buying tractors is incredibly low. And despite it being a very lucrative opportunity for entrepreneurs, right? We have right now a couple thousand tractors in Nigeria. And of that group of tractors, we have had 0 defaults for the finance tractors, right? It's a great opportunity. And that's despite having incredibly high interest rates and financing that tractor at 20, 25%, right? Zero defaults. So it's a great opportunity, but the capital just isn't there to support that lending and grow the marketplace. And so as a result, the machines aren't there and the land remains uncultivated. Going back to the statistic that Nick alluded to.
Thank you. So I want to take up a couple of points that you mentioned. And Regina, I understand that you've got a bit of a connection issue, so we're going to have her with her camera off for a little while so you can better hear her. But I think there's 2 really important points that you brought up, which is that there's the technology aspect of supply to labor, but then that labor might be limited by certain factors. And I'd love to think about the role that youth play in advancing some of these opportunities. So that probably is a question for Regina. And then maybe we can pick up after that regarding how we might shift the issues around, capitalizing or markets around financing to advance this work. So Regina, can you speak more to the role of youth in this work?
Mm-hmm. Yes, so youth definitely are seen as a huge labor, I'd say, output for the continent. I think as some of us know, within the continent, the percentage of youth, these are people under the age of 30 years, is 70%. So Africa has one of the most youngest population ever. But looking at that again, so we have this massive youth, but most of them are not employed. Specific example, in Kenya, we have about 40% of the youth are unemployed. That's huge, right? So, and you cannot expect governments or private institutions to be able to absorb all these youth and provide them jobs. Is actually, or farming is seen as a huge opportunity where the youth can actually go and create jobs. And it's not only the youth, it's also women. I think women will also be the biggest beneficiary when it comes to agri-tech innovation and us putting a lot of investment in agriculture. One of the statistics that I saw recently, 80 to 90% of farming in Kenya, continent in Africa, is done by women. This is small-scale farming. Yet the amount of women who own land is about 2%. So 2% own land, yet they're the people who are producing or providing labor to agriculture. So I think there's a lot that needs to be done there. So youth and women will be some of the biggest beneficiaries. And we are seeing now a lot more capital going into agriculture, especially agri-tech innovation, smart farming. People are not relying on just rain and also in water. And so there's a lot of technology people are using to be able to farm in a smart way. So this is a huge opportunity for youth to be able to agriculture as a business. It's not just a way of providing food, it's a huge business opportunity, and there's a lot of money to be made in agriculture.
Thank you. Nick, I would love to ask you to follow up. Regina ended with there's just a lot of opportunities. So beyond I believe it was the Solar Freeze, which was the company that is using solar energy to help with storage or food storage to mitigate loss of food. Nick, I think you were talking before about sort of there's a lot of really innovative work in food systems, like, so for example, cultured meats, et cetera. Could you talk more about what opportunities are available in terms of innovation in that space as well? Sir, you're on mute.
Yeah, that happens a lot, doesn't it? Cultured meats is a good example of the interface between advanced technologies on one hand that are going to enhance agriculture production and food security in Africa. But also, let's keep our eye on, let's not lose sight of innovations and best practices that we know help smallholder farmers. And it's not to say it's an either or, it's in our mind space and in our innovation space. We have to keep both of those approaches, give them both room for innovation. And what I'm talking about is from a smallholder farmer's perspective, they're probably not so much interested in cultured meat. They're really interested, what would help them most are innovations such as Hello Tractor, digitizing their existing farming systems, and doing what we know are best practices, like regenerative agriculture. It may not be the sexiest thing in the world, it's not the high technology, but regenerative agriculture and all the practices behind that we know work. And I think from a innovation and financing perspective, let's not lose sight of that. But at the same time, I personally feel cultured meat is a keystone technological breakthrough that's going to help save the world. That's my own view here, and that is because we know the environmental damage that our current meat production does. We know the greenhouse gases, climate change implications. We know the disease implications and the ethical issues around that, et cetera, et cetera. I don't need to go through that list because I'm sure our viewers are well aware of it. Those same breakthroughs in cultured meat apply equally well to consumers in Africa. And what I think of immediately is, why not innovators in Africa be opening up local cultured meat factories and laboratories? And that can be happening in a radical decentralized manner. You could imagine a situation where small towns around Africa have their local meat laboratory. And that's where people are getting their proteins in an environmentally sustainable manner and ethically viable way. So the future of agriculture in Africa, I guess I'm trying to say two things in one breath. One hand, let's not lose sight of best practices for smallholder farmers. And as I said off the top of this, 80% of farms are smallholder farms, for sure. At the same time, there is the innovations that we know are helping North America, Europe, Japan, China solve their meat challenges, particularly with cultured meat, are going to be equally applicable to Africa. And what I'm super excited about is seeing African entrepreneurs and innovators enter that space so that they are also participating in those breakthrough technologies from an invention point of view, but also from an entrepreneurship perspective.
Thank you. You're actually touching on a few points. I'm going to just look real quick at some of the questions because, Nick, you've brought up a few points that our viewers have started to ask related to environment. So one that I wanted to amplify is that, let's see, I wanted to talk about two things. So Jahil, let's put this over to you and then we'll come back to soil quality because, Nick, you were talking about, environmentally best practices around like inputs, et cetera, for the soil. So Jahil, is there an infrastructure for electric tractors? Can they leapfrog and not install diesel tractors?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question and one that we look at quite a bit. I think from a R&D perspective, you do have quite a few companies currently working on and a prototype electric tractors. I think we're probably a few years away from that machinery being in the market and commercially available at a price point that is accessible to our customer base, which generally tends to be that smallholder farmer who gets the service and a SME kind of player who is owning the tractor delivering the services. But we have partners right now that are working on that, and we have conversations about it and building up that incremental infrastructure to support that electric tractor. But before that even happens, there's also a lot of things going on around conservation agriculture and mechanization to support things like soil fertility, to support the longer term health of that land that is a rich resource, but it's a resource that needs to be protected. And so a big part, I think that's the first leapfrog opportunity, is to think about the longer term responsibility that farmers have to the land and vice versa, because their livelihood is tied up into that. And then once you cross that hurdle and the technology catches up to the users, because I think there's appetite for it, then you can start to deploy the electric tractors, and who knows, even autonomous tractors, right? That's not so far-fetched. So there's a lot of opportunities there, and I think we're always doing that balancing act of getting really excited about the frontier technology while not ignoring the immediate term issues and things that we can affect today.
Thank you for that. And so actually, I'll follow that up with another question from our viewer. And I want to pose this to the three of you because I'm assuming each of you has a perspective given your particular context. How much awareness do you think exists in Africa today around agricultural innovation and its impact to or on climate change?
I don't know who should go first.
Let's go with Nick. Let's go with Nick, because he was bringing that up.
I think that's a fascinating question. Let me start off the top. I guess something that's kind of obvious is our challenges with climate change are not caused by Africans, and Africans are going to be some of the people who are most vulnerable and suffer the most from climate change. This is one of our great climate injustices going on right now. This is climate change itself is not something I would say that, and this is obviously massive generalization. It's not at the top of the mind of the African farmer because he or she has to earn a livelihood. It just so happens that the way that they're earning their livelihood doesn't contribute to climate change, the way that our lifestyles in Western countries and industrialized countries have done so up to date. And this is why we need a wholesale transformation in the way that we get our energy systems and food systems, et cetera. So I would say it's not at the top of the mind, other than policymakers are surely aware of this. Government officials are surely aware of the linkage because they know how vulnerable Africa is to drought, to storm surges, to changes in crop agricultural zones. These will have profound impacts on agriculture production, food security, and the livelihoods of Africans.
Such an important point regarding just the vulnerability and climate justice. We had talked a while ago about land sovereignty, so I kind of feel that that's also an important question to add. Maybe Jahil, Regina, or Nick, I'm not sure who's best or who would like to talk most about this, but what is the role of land sovereignty in terms of African peoples being able to own how their land is used and sort of create policies around usage of that land, or just have sovereignty themselves around how that land goes forward in addressing food systems issues or even advancing food systems and being a model for the rest of the world to follow? Maybe a complicated question, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. Maybe Regina, especially since you work a lot with youth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is definitely an issue. And as you said, it's quite complicated. Part of that is from colonization, where land was given to people who are extremely powerful, who inherited the government, and they have access to huge portions of land. Some people are actually unfairly disadvantaged from land that their people owned, and they were moved from those land. Then now, up to now, current issues that we're seeing where China has entered the market, and China is getting into deals with our leaders, deals that are not very favorable to fellow Africans. So they get huge pieces of land, and the idea is they farm, they cultivate, and they are able to send the raw materials or the food produce to China. So it's very complicated because it's issues around the past injustices to now the current, where we have leaders who are not really thinking about their local people, kind of like selfish and getting into deals that are not benefiting the entire community. So that's something that we're seeing going on. And like in Kenya, one of the things that we're doing is there's a lot of land reform, but of course it's taking quite a lot of time, and we are hoping the land reform and also being able to digitize land will be able to ensure that people are getting like their fair share of their ancestral land or the land that they should own. Nick, I don't know whether you have something else to add. You have a few ideas around this.
Just very quickly, and then Jimmy, I'd like to hear from you as well. When I think of land sovereignty, there's really two aspects of that. One is the foreign contracts that are being given to foreign entities to cultivate very large hectares of land. For example, in the last recent 10-year period, over 20 million hectares have been allocated for foreign contracts. These are countries from outside of Africa contracting the cultivation of 20 million hectares, which is this equivalent of South Africa and Zimbabwe combined cultivatable land. This is not a small fraction, it's a significant fraction of land in Africa. And they have the contract to produce food to send it outside of the continent, which brings this issue of land sovereignty to the forefront. And then there's the other aspect of this, and that is one of the promising technological uses is blockchain to allocate land rights. And when people have land rights, that person who's sitting on 2 hectares or 4 hectares, when particularly this is a gendered issue as well, when a woman has a land right that's now in the blockchain and registered, she now can go to a bank and get a bank loan to capitalize her business. Without such land rights, and we're still nowhere even close to registering land rights in terms of what's needed. But without those, that farmer, especially if it's a woman, is basically invisible to our financial systems. And blockchain has a lot of promise. It's not to say it's a panacea. There are also challenges with that as well, which is a whole nother discussion. But land sovereignty is at 2 scales here. One are foreign countries doing large contracts. And the other one is land sovereignty, actually giving land rights to the smallholders so that he or she can be part of the financial system.
Jahil, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I think definitely especially the land rights piece is something that we think a lot about. We just completed a implementation of blockchain in partnership with IBM so that tractors delivering services on our platform and that GPS that we embed on all the tractors is writing to a smart contract, keeping that digital record so that individual who has access and is working that land can show the receipt that, for the last 5 years, I've been investing on this land. I've gotten these services on this land, and I have right to this. I think that's an important piece because, to Nick's point, land is an important piece of collateral for individuals to access capital to grow their farming business. And we do think of these growers as business owners. And so information is a big part of unlocking that capital. And so we see a lot of promise in that as well. And I think the market is trending in the right direction, albeit slowly. But it's certainly something that we think a lot about and are putting at least the technology infrastructure in place to create that transparency across the market.
Thank you. As a follow-up question from one of our viewers, they were, let's see, I'm trying to find it in the list. Here we go. So given these countries coming in and buying up large swaths of land, one of our viewers asks, how do we prevent soil quality from degrading due to more intensive agriculture as we see in India and China? So China is a big buyer of land in Africa. So given that, and given the need to avoid soil degradation, to protect that land, how do we prevent that? That's a really excellent question. What do you think our roles are? I don't know who might. Regina, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think that's a bit, it could be a bit difficult, but now with the platform, like the social media platform, I think it's quite easy to activate youth and people who care about sustainable farming, have them in a platform and also create a lot of awareness on what's happening. Because most of the discussions you're having here, this is not common knowledge to most people. So like leveraging a social media online platform and bringing people together, making sure they have the right information and catalyzing them now to push our leaders to be able to change some of these policies that they've implemented. I think that would be one way where we would be using the masses to create change and have that as a bottom-up approach.
Yeah, that's, sorry, I wanna let the Nick and Jahil, I'd love for you to answer this question as well, but one of our viewers commented that maybe the only technologies that will change the world is or are social technologies, which is what you were just saying, Regina. Conversations attached to actions that create these meetings with social groups and then create some accountability around that as well. So Nick, I don't know if you or Jahil have any thoughts on additional roles we might play, or the role of technology in addressing protection of land, et cetera.
Well, I think just real quickly, you know, typically when you think about conservation, people frame that discussion in a conversation about trade-offs. And what we've seen in our business is there are specific things that you can do, at least from a mechanization perspective, to yes, increase the productivity of the land, intensify agriculture, but also protect the soil. So things like chisel plowing instead of using the disc plows, things like deep ripping for better water resource management. These are practical steps that farmers can take to not only improve their yield and protect their income, because that's a trade-off that you should never ask somebody to make at the base of the pyramid, but also protect the land. And it's that win-win where you focus your effort there and get those easy wins. And then some of the more difficult things, like opening up new lands for agriculture, can be step two. Because I think that's the next step is once you start making more money in agriculture, you start growing more. And then you have to get into protecting the ecology overall. But the easy kind of immediate steps are things that are you know, minimal tillage conservation practices that are a win-win for the farmer and for the environment.
Do you think these are something that have to be self-directed, or what role might government also play in that as well?
I mean, government is always going to be centrally important for agriculture, just because of the nature of the industry. But at the same time, we can't wait for the government, right? So some of the things that we've done in partnership with some of the corporate partners that we work with, like John Deere, is things like we built these farmer demo vans that have TV screens and tents and chairs. We go out into the communities and show people in these videos the long-term benefits of things like practicing conservation agriculture. And then we have tractors there on site that can also show them in real time what this looks like and how we can benefit them and their productivity. And so I think, yes, there's a role for government. And I think through things like CADEC and other, Africa Union-led and continental-wide policies, you'll start to see more government engagement and investment. But for today, I think there's certain things that we can do as private sector, even as citizens, to make sure this change happens now, and for the benefit of the environment and the farm.
I like that. I think it's such a critical point. So while what I hear you're saying is that indeed the government is going to be an essential partner for this work, but really the time is now for innovators to come in, or to within their own spaces, to really find ways to push this forward. I love this aspect of education that you mentioned, is that there's sort of this this going in and informing people, demonstrating the tools, et cetera, that really help empower people to do this work. Nick, may I ask if you want to add anything to this conversation or this particular line of thread?
Well, just to point out that there's other technological innovations such as greenhouses, hydroponics, vertical farming, which is going to be part of the mix in the future. Already greenhouse farming is well established in many countries, and a lot of entrepreneurs do that. Hydroponics is happening already in the very arid areas of Africa, and it holds great promise. I know the World Food Program is doing a number of projects with great success, and for entrepreneurs to pick that up. Vertical farming is something which is not out of the question. We talk about all this available land, but probably we also would remind the viewers, it's that land, uncultivated land, is also playing biodiversity functions. Yeah. And when we translate that into agricultural practices, depending upon how that's done, we can be net loss in terms of the global environmental systems. So our answer isn't necessarily to go out and exploit all the uncultivatable land. It's do it in a sustainable way, and to put other technological innovations in that mix. And then one idea that popped into my head when the viewer asked what could be done about the foreign contracts. One thing from a policy perspective, it could be a little bit akin to mining contracts, where miners have to do land rehabilitation. And agricultural practices, if they're done with clear cutting and deep tillage and requiring a lot of fertilizer inputs, et cetera, have a long-term detrimental effect on the land. That is really akin to mining. And there could be a formula there to ensure that those people who have those contracts at least do land rehabilitation.
Thank you. Okay. So I know we wanted to get into a specific section on Q&A, and I've been integrating some of the questions, but before we go very explicit into some of those questions, I'd love to hear, we talked about this narrative before of Africa, right? It's really helpful to know, for example, it's a huge place, right? With a lot of diversity, a lot of opportunity, with also challenges that come with that. So I'd love to ask each of you, what do you think the accurate narrative for Africa is? And how can we make sure that we're highlighting the amazing stories and work that's coming out of Africa and move beyond Western perceptions and narratives about Africa? May I start with you, Regina?
Yes.
So
in my opinion, I think one of the correct narrative about Africa should be what we've been seeing over the past couple of years. It's narrative about the continent that's mostly negative, famine, drought, etc. And those statistics of those stories might be true, but there's also a ton of cool stories that's happening on the ground. There's a lot of innovation that's happening. There's everyday stories that are very, stop my video, I think I'm breaking. There's a lot of really cool stories that are happening on the ground, and it's important for us as narrators and everyone to be able to share the whole story side, like in any other community. And however, I'm also very optimistic because now everyone has access to internet. Everyone is able to blog, share their story on different social media platforms. Is to us as Africans and also friends of the continent. Doesn't have to be Africa, it's African Friends of Africa, to be able to take this as a challenge and be able, so that we also share stories. We should not let other people share our stories. We should be at the forefront of sharing our own stories and telling people and educating people what's happening on the ground, and that should be able to change the narrative.
Thank you.
Also, actually, maybe my last point around challenges on the continent. So yes, that's true. There's a lot of challenges on the continent, but as Peter Diamandis says, the co-founder of Singularity University, some of the biggest challenges are some of the biggest opportunities. So if you have that mindset, every time you see or you learn of a challenge on the continent and think of it as a business opportunity instead of like, oh my God, that, right? That's a mindset that would be able to create a lot more innovations, create a lot of jobs for the youth, and it really related to food alone. I might have forgot to share this. The market cap for food on the continent at the moment is around $300, and it's estimated to be at $1 trillion by 2030. So yes, there is famine now. Yes, there is drought now. Yes, people are dying of hunger, but this is a huge market that if we all go in, we'll be able to create a lot of opportunities for a lot of people.
Thank you. Nick or Jahil, do you want to add to that?
I think the only thing I would add is that the opportunities are, to me, obvious. Anybody who is paying attention to macroeconomic statistics and growth rates out of Africa, these are some of the highest growth economies on earth, and that's not an exaggeration. But instead of talking about shifting the narrative, which I think is an important point, I want to talk to people who, those of us in the diaspora, who are very well positioned to come to Africa and use the resources that have been accumulated outside of the continent to contribute to this growth narrative and take advantage of these opportunities, and then amplify the value that's created for the benefit of our diasporan community. I think that piece is important. I think if people want to fixate on the negative elements of Africa, and I think every region on earth has negative things to say about it, but if people want to amplify that and not talk about all the upside and opportunity, well, let them do it. I think you'll look back, just like some people look back at the China growth story or the Asian tigers and say, wow, that was my opportunity. Well, you missed your opportunity with Africa. And I'm telling you that today. It might happen 5 years from now, it might be 10, but you will regret it. And the story to those in the diaspora community is, shame on you if you miss it, because you're best positioned to take advantage. And I think that we have a small team, but we have a very dedicated team of people who reflect that principle very clearly. People from the continent and people from the diaspora.
Love that. You heard it here first. Lots of opportunity. And I hope you're also loudly hearing Jahil's call for those of us that want to go back and contribute to this growth. Nick, may I also ask you to share some thoughts on this narrative, or even maybe an additional point that hasn't been considered here?
Well, the fact that Africa is not constrained by legacy systems to the degree that Europe, North America is. This is a radical transformation is underway now without those legacy systems. That means it's going to happen faster. Our transformation to the digital future, our transformation of our energy systems, our water systems, our agriculture systems, our learning systems. It's all underway right now in Africa, and the uptake is already in process. That equates to incredible opportunity, not just for innovators and investors, and sure, that's very exciting, but for solving the world's biggest challenges. And I think the narrative that I would want to lock onto is, if we're to solve the world's biggest challenges, it's going to happen because Africa was successful in solving its own challenges. And that means engaging, outsiders engaging with Africans, not to transplant external solutions and assume they're going to work here, but actually partner with, listen to, engage with African entrepreneurs and investors and folks from the continent to be able to come up with solutions that are unique to and viable for Africa. And where Africa succeeds, the world will succeed in creating global abundance.
Yeah, that's a really great segue into, I think, an important question that one of our viewers have posed. Loving the calls for, hey, come and be a part of this innovation and contribute to these innovations and do so productively. So I think this question about how do we ensure that these bright ideas that we have, right, don't cause new problems in the context of Africa. Yeah, I don't know who wants to take that one. Regina, I see you smiling.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So I think it's hard to be 100% sure that your ideas will not cause problems. The way I look at it is sometimes one solution might create another problem, but that problem might not be as bad as the initial problem you're trying to solve. So I think in terms of people who are trying to enter the market with radical ideas, talk with the people. Most of the things that actually work on the continent are community-based. Go meet with communities, talk to the village elders, talk to the leaders within the community, try to figure out why some of the ideas you think you're coming in, why they may or not work. There are so many stories where people would come with an idea that's probably working in the US. You come on the ground and you realize this will actually not work right here because of different issues. So it's just making sure market research and talking to the right people to be able to know what will work and what will not work. It also helps having networks. As you know, we Africans are very relational. So sometimes if you want, make sure you have the right networks, talk to people, ask people for help if you need help. That's how things move.
Thank you. Jahil, anything you want to add to that?
I think Regina hit it right on the head. I think listening to the people that matter most, which is going to be your customer, which is going to be, if it's agriculture, it's going to be that farmer. And, you know, Harvard Business Review reads very well, but it's very likely that the farmer that you serve knows a lot more about agriculture on the continent than the experts. And that's a lesson we learned the hard way. We took all these expert opinions over with us. And it took us a while to figure out that most of it was rubbish, and we really need to pay attention to our customer and respect the fact that they've been doing this for generations and they know a lot more about agriculture than we ever will on the continent, and build that into products that serve them. And I think that's a great way to make sure that you're net accretive to the communities that you service, because people will tell you when you're not. And they also won't buy your products, so.
Yes. All right, I feel like this is a great way to end, but Nick, we started with you and I would love to let you have the last word with the last 10 seconds we've got. What do you say?
On that particular point, this might sound strange coming from someone who has global grand challenges in his title, but with regards to bringing innovations and adopting them to Africa, start small. Don't come with the mindset that suddenly whatever you're working on is a panacea solution to Africa's challenges. No, I can tell you that right off the bat. Start small and learn by doing, and learn by listening, like to the points that Regina and Jahil were talking about, not with a mindset of, oh, I've got the solution that's going to solve Africa's challenges, because that's completely the wrong framework. But engage. The opportunity is there, and I think that's the headline. Is there's the future of abundance is going to be in Africa, and this is an opportunity for all of us in the world to join hands and innovate together.
Thank you. And with that, I will say thank you so much for joining us. We covered a lot of ground, and I hope that this has helped you get a good framework and understanding about the food systems work that's happening in Africa. If you'd like to learn more, please join us for more of our digital salons and summits that we hold regularly here at Singularity University. Thank you.